participate in this lecture by Dr. Anil Rajvanshi. I will introduce him briefly and then let him take over on his proposed title, in which he has included IIT in a major way. Dr. Anil Rajvanshi has a long experience in renewable energy. He did his BTech and MTech in mechanical engineering from IIT Kanpur, 1972 and 74. He received his PhD in mechanical engineering from University of Florida, Gainesville, in 79 under the pioneer of solar energy research, Dr. Eric Faber. He was on the faculty of University of Florida for 2 years before returning to India and starting his own NGO called Nimkar Agricultural Research Institute, NARI. Through this institute, he has done pioneering work in renewable energy and environment areas, especially affecting rural populations. He has devoted last 25 years at NARI to apply sophisticated science and technology to solve problems faced by rural population in the areas of energy, water pollution, income generation, and broadly based on renewable energy in environmentally sound ways. Consequently, very innovative technologies have been developed at NARI, including ethanol from sweet sorghum, solar distillation plant from ethanol, and so on. He has written extensively on his work on rural self-sufficiency and has attracted attention of print and visual media. He has about 120 publications and 5 patents to his credit. He is the principal author of the Government of India National Policy on Energy Self-Sufficient Talukas. For his pioneering work, he has received a number of prestigious awards, such as Jamnalal Bajaj Award, induction to the US-based Solar Hall of Fame, the FICCI Annual Award, Energy Globe Award, and so on. He has been featured as a speaker at many professional conferences, both in India and abroad, including US. Aside from these technical aspects, he has also interest in spirituality and human consciousness, and he has recently published a book entitled Nature of Human Thought, which tries to bring about a synthesis of ancient Indian yogic thought and modern cosmology and brain research. So, Dr. Anil Rajvanshi.
There is a saying that people who can't do physics, they do metaphysics. And I have come to that level where I think I have become a very useless person in my technology, and so I have to do something, and that's what I have started doing. But anyway, it's wonderful to be here, and I must really thank profusely Dr. Mishra for inviting me. Without his invitation, it would not have been possible. I used to come in 80s and 90s to teach in the energy systems in mechanical engineering, and so it is really wonderful to be back in this institute. The title of my talk today is Nation Building, IITians and Happiness, and I hope that I will be able to inspire some of the bright brains of this premier institute in trying to do something in the lines of helping India, making it a vibrant and a great country, and in the process, hopefully, that you become happy yourself and try to bring in happiness for a lot of the people in this country. I run a small NGO. This is in Fulton, which is a rural taluka in Maharashtra, which is around 300 kilometers southeast of Bombay, and everything that we do is on our site, and so you are most welcome to look at that and see what we do. Why nation building is important? All life forms want a comfortable and happy life, and in the case of human beings, it is a sum of 2 things: personal happiness and better environment. Personal happiness can be obtained in many ways, and I'll talk about it in the last slide of my talk. And it is the environment or the environmental happiness which I call as a nation building. You become extremely happy about your environment, and if it is an enabling environment, then you feel very happy, you feel proud of it, you feel a certain amount of attachment to it, And that is what basically is nation building. Some of you will go later on to America, you feel very proud to be in America. Some of you will go to Europe, you will feel very proud to be in Europe. Why can't you feel proud to be in India? Is because that you might have not changed the environment, or the environment is not enabling. And this is exactly what I hope that when you will go to some place where you will become very big shots, that you will, with your resources and the other things, you should make the environment enabling so that it becomes a happy environment. This environment happiness also gives us a sense of belonging, and which makes us proud and gives a sense of ownership. And this is exactly what I think and what I call as nation building. Our pride should be genuine and not of insecurity. I have met a lot of Indians in America who feel very proud of being an Indian, not from the sake of that there are certain things which we should be very proud, but there is some sort of an insecurity. They try to justify everything about India as greatness, and that comes from an insecurity. When you become secure, the first thing that happens to you is you become aware of a lot of problems that surround you, that surrounding the country, and you try to help it. If you are insecure, you will never try to help it, but you will try to justify it, and that is really a problem. For environmental happiness and nation building, we need excellent people like you, and that is the reason why I am here. And I hope that some of you will come and join me, will do something similar type that what I am doing, and will try to help the country. How can youth participate in nation building? First, accept that whatever we are today is because of the country and society. Hence, we should give something back to the society. Gratitude is a sense of being human. We are different from animals. We are grateful, and that gratefulness is something which is extremely important. And you should feel gratitude, because whatever it is, maybe an accident that you were born in this country. We don't know, but once you are born in this country, it is this country. Whatever the infrastructure we have, I'm sure we will like to all improve it. But whatever infrastructure we have is, we are here because of that, and we should know that what is the problem, and we should try to improve on that. Half an hour per day, just 2% of the time, very small amount of time, you should give it back to the society. And this is, if you add up to it, it becomes a huge amount of time, and you will be very happy and very proud in doing that. So it's a very small amount of time. It reminds me of a very interesting thing. Gandhiji had started learning different languages. Whichever state he went, he used to learn the language of the state. No matter how much was the pressing work, there were messages from all over the world, and yet he would spend exactly half an hour on learning a language, and nobody would bother him, and nobody could bother him. It is amazing. In a certain span of time, he had started writing in Bengali, in Odia, in other languages, and it was amazing that how he could do it. And still, I am sure that all of us, if we start putting together what we do, just logging on what we do for our time, we'll be surprised that how much time we really waste. And half an hour time is not too much to ask for giving it back to society. Work on anything in which you interact with the surroundings and can help make it better. This work of helping needy students, cleaning surroundings, anything that your surroundings are, you work on that. And if you work on that, then I'm sure that you will be able to achieve something. It is not necessary to do really a great work, but whatever surrounds you, if you start working on it, thinking about it, that is the work of society. Just trying to conserve energy. Energy is a very major problem in this country right now. And you, as students of an extremely premier institute, energy to my mind is the most important thing that you should all work on. And I think just to conserve energy in whatever way you can is a great help to the society. Keep a daily log of the energy consumed and how much you can save it. And if you do that, you'll be surprised that you will try to find out what can be done and what is possible. How can youth help in nation building? Even thinking on improving your surroundings, writing about it and telling others how society work. I'm not bragging, but when I was doing my bachelor's, my first editorial article in Hindi Hindustan came. I just went to the library, read about the solar energy. Solar energy in 1972 was just coming up. And I read it and I was very fascinated by that. And I wrote an article which was translated into Hindi. I think this was the best thing that I ever did, and I was very proud of it. And it gives you a tremendous amount of sense of achievement and it was read by a large number of people. It was not at all an article by any expert, etc. Just putting it together. Do that. It's amazing what you can do, and especially the bright minds that you are, you can do wonderful things. Be active, and this activity will give you a positive frame of mind. I'm sure you are all active, but mostly on internet, seeing the CD, doing emailing and chatting. That is not a very great activity. Sure, it keeps you much involved and too much time is taken, but there are so many things. I'm not saying that you go and become a Gandhi or you go to the rural areas. Just round you. I came from Pune in the morning and look at the potholes. What type of city you live in? I'm not saying that you're going to go in tomorrow and start filling the potholes, but there are so many issues. There are some friends of mine who are really pressurizing the PMC in Pune on the potholes, and finally something is happening. Some NGOs are being formed. There's so many activities you can do. And since you come from a premium institute, if you do this, people will listen to it. If somebody does it from some other college, they might not listen. So you be active. Try to do something, and I think it will be a wonderful thing. Develop a can-do approach. You should be bubbling with ideas. Best ideas are the maximum ideas. This is not my idea. This is the idea of a great man called, I think it was Pauling, the man who developed the nature of carbon bond. Unless you have a huge amount of ideas, you will not have a great idea. Great ideas can only come when you have a large number of ideas. Be positive in your approach, rise above the negative things, make them irrelevant. This is how nature evolves. We Indians have this tremendous ability to bring people down. Nature never does that. Nature evolves by branching. When it branches, it makes the other branch irrelevant. When it makes it irrelevant, this means it rises above the other process, it takes the whole system up. We Indians are wonderful in trying to bring the system, people down. If you do that, because I know we all went through IIT, I do not know how the system right now. In our times, we had some students who would even write, they used to apply for scholarship. And when we applied for scholarship and somebody got the scholarship, some of my classmates who bribed the postman, he got the letters, and then it was written to the university that I am not interested in that. This is how we did it. This is a very negative thing. I am just giving you one example out of 20,000, etc. I know that most of you are very nice and good people. But I am sure that you can all become even better by making the other dark or lower forces irrelevant. Don't worry about the outcome. When I talk to youngsters, they ask 3 times a day, where am I going? What is my future? You should be more worried about your learning. You should be more worried about your education. You should be more worried about your knowledge. Things will happen. Positive things happen when you do positive things. This is a law of nature. When you are positive in your approach, a lot of very good things start happening to you. You are doing the society work for yourself, discipline and discovery. And satisfaction in helping others is an extremely important thing, and I am sure that you will feel very happy when you start helping others. What are the issues in nation building? And now I will come to my second part, in which I will tell you what exactly people like you should be doing. 60% of our rural population, yesterday 59 years after independence, it's a really sad state of affairs that 60% of our population live in extremely primitive conditions. They do not have any electricity. In fact, according to the government data, there are 20,000 villages in this country which have never seen electricity since independence, or even before that. They still use kerosene lanterns which are developed in early 1800. They use a huge amount of biomass and extremely primitive cook stoves, which has a tremendous impact on their health. And then there is which has been used for thousands of years, and somehow the modern technology has not touched their life. And yet our leaders, and I'm sure that a lot of these leaders come to your institute, we talk about becoming the 3rd most economically advanced country in the world. And they are all the time talking about becoming after America and China. And I don't think, this is my personal opinion, and I hope that I am proven wrong, because when 60% of our population lives in extremely primitive conditions, we cannot become a great society. unless and until we bring those people back into mainstream of development. And this is your work, because you are the future of this country. And this is what I am going to talk about. How can we bring extremely sophisticated science and technology in trying to improve the quality of life of these people, in trying to improve the environment. When we improve the environment, we make it a very great nation, and in that process, I think you will become a very happy person. 60% of our rural population. Wonderful, wonderful. Yes, yes, possible. Without these people getting into mainstream, environment cannot be improved. Hence, nation building in true sense is bringing these people in mainstream of development. Helping the rural poor is the biggest challenge for us. In fact, to my mind, not sending the man to the moon or the Mars that some of our leaders are talking about, but really bringing these people up. The amount of money that we can spend, that is not so much as in helping in bringing these people up, and that will be a very great thing for our country. And another very interesting thing, 54% of our India's population is below 25 years of age. This is a tremendous shift into demography that is taking place, and a lot of them live in rural areas and are unemployed. One of the biggest scourge of India is unemployment in rural areas. And unless and until we bring in tremendous amount of employment through certain things that I will talk about, we will not be able to bring these people up. And without these people coming up, India cannot become a great country. And I think the best way to create wealth and improve the quality of life is to have enterprises, and we'll talk about enterprises based upon energy, because energy, to my mind, is the most important thing. And once the agriculture starts producing energy, both in terms of liquid fuels and in terms of electricity, then we will have a tremendous amount of money flowing into rural areas. What can we do now in the future? This is a very interesting thing. You will all go and become extremely important people in whichever areas you go, because you are bright and smart. And even if you go abroad, think how you can create conditions to improve the lives of these people, because use your considerable clout to create enterprises for these people. This is your contribution to society. The very interesting part is that you, and even today, IITians are becoming extremely important in whatever they are doing. We are creating a really critical mass, and I think this Pan IIT and other things which are happening, there is a very big push and movement towards the Bharat Nirman, and all of the people in my generation are playing a role, and I'm sure the people in your generation play an extremely important role. And this is what I feel you should do, because a lot of you are going to stay in this country, and if you make this country as a great country, you will feel very happy about it. How you can do that? How will you do it till you do not know what is rural India? How many of you come from rural India? How many of you really know about rural India? Good. So I see some few. I would like you to spend a year or 2 years after your graduation just as an apprentice in some of the rural NGOs. I am talking from a very selfish point of view. I would like to have some of you join me for 1 or 2 years. I'll give you enough to keep your body and soul together. I'm not going to make you die, because I do not want a death on my hand, but I'll make sure that you survive. 2 years or 1 year of your life is nothing compared to the 80 years that you will live. Today, our average age for Indian is 75, and I think by the time you reach that age, it will become 80. And 1 year is nothing, but in 1 year, you will do wonderful, because with your bright minds, you will try to see what can be done. At the same time, you will know what rural India is all about. I do not want you to spend your time, unless you want to spend your time in rural India. Go and become big shots in corporate, go and do wonderful in United States, but use that knowledge that you gain in 1 year to help rural India. Through NGOs, through so many areas, because that will be your much more contribution, because there are a lot of times if you come and just stay in rural India without your resources, that will be useless. In fact, it reminds me of Gandhiji's thing. There are a lot of people who used to come to Gandhiji and used to say that you would like to go to jail. He says, what a stupid idea, because if I put you in jail, I will not get anything. I want important people to go to jail, because that will give me a lot of publicity. And this is what I want. I want all of you to do wonderful in you become big head of corporate sector, become big shots in the Silicon Valley, but utilize. Today, Mr. Bill Gates is putting a huge amount of his own personal money in the Gates Foundation for whatever. I don't agree with some of the things that he's doing, because there are other things that he could do with his huge amount of money. But this is what you can do, and this is exactly what I call nation building. Wherever you go, help create venture and other funds so that the rural enterprises access the soft funds. In fact, one of the biggest problems that we have in rural India is access of funds for enterprises. You can have venture funds, where if you want to set up a software company, you can have venture funds in doing something else. But when I want to do something small in rural India, then I do not have access to venture funds. And this is something that a lot of you will go and do when you become an MBA and etc. Use your corporate or enterprise resources to help rural areas. Use of very high technology for rural applications, lighting, cooking, water, and this is what I'll talk about. And set up science and technology based NGOs to tie up with existing NGOs for spreading the technologies and ideas. Technology intervention. Now, how many of you are going to become an MBA? Raise your hands. One honest guy in the whole group. And I'm sure there are a lot of people who are going to become MBAs. This is a very major thing. We all come to engineering, then we go to MBAs, then we go into IAS, etc. Why did you do that? A lot of people say that, I can utilize my knowledge, but it doesn't happen. You are all groomed in a very premier institute to become good engineers. I feel that the future of the world is knowledge, which will come from technology. I am here, you are here, this hall is here because of technology. We are a technological society. We are in the technological age. Every technology touches our life. We should stick to our technology and we should create wonderful things through our technology. And this is something which I would like to tell you, because through technology, you see, you can manage later on. You can go to an MBA later on. It is not a very big thing, but you create a technology for helping either rural or urban. That will be a great thing. And that, to my mind, is the most important thing, that students from institutes like IITs should stick to technology and should create the technological solutions. We require, up till now there has been a lot of efforts all over the world in rural development, but it has been a tinkering thing. I have been propagating for quite a number of years that we require extremely high technology, because of the fact that the people in the rural areas are no different than you and I are. They don't have a single neuron less than you and I have. They have the same aspirations. They watch the same TV. They look at the same things. So why shouldn't they get the same quality of life that you and I can get? Why don't the people in the rural areas have the flick of the switch get light? At the flick of the switch, they should get a very clean fuel for cooking, and they should get clean water. Though clean water is a question mark, because you don't even get a clean water in urban areas. But the question is that this is exactly what we require, and this can only come through technology and through high technology. Why high technology? Because the resources available in rural areas are not very extensive and not very concentrated like gas or coal or anything. They have only resources like biomass, solar, which are very dilute, and we require sophisticated technology to convert those resources into useful end product, and this is what I will talk about. So biomimicry is a very important dictum for design. In fact, the same level of technology, in fact even more sophisticated technology, is required for rural development than for urban areas. In fact, that is the reason why I am talking to you, because I want that you students should go into this and try to develop extremely sophisticated technology, and we will talk about how nanotechnology and biotechnology can be utilized in development of devices which can bring in the quality of life of the rural poor. As students of premier technology, we should work in technology areas rather than going in management. And I will focus on 2 or 3 things. There are a large number of things, and we can discuss for hours and hours on what is required, but I will focus only on cooking and lighting, because this takes up almost 75% of the total energy used in rural households. Have you seen that how much energy you utilize in cooking and lighting for your own household? It will be a very small percentage, 20-25%. But in rural areas, this is the maximum amount of energy is required. Because of the level of poverty, to them the most important thing is to have cooking and lighting. And lighting requires, they mostly are using lighting with the kerosene lights, and some of them I don't even have the kerosene lights. So I'll talk about the strategy for lighting. Liquid fuel lighting. Now, okay. Up till now, all these people are using, most of the people are using the simple hurricane lanterns. I think all of you have seen the hurricane lanterns, and some of them have used it. It hardly gives you any light. It gives you light enough for you to walk around, especially when it is very dark. Very few students can really study, though there have been wonderful examples of people who have become very great by studying in hurricane lanterns, but those examples are very few. And yet, there is a large number of people who use this. And the sad part is that this kerosene, which is supposed to be for poor, is not available. In fact, in Western Maharashtra, you cannot get kerosene anymore because it all goes in two-wheelers and in adulteration with diesel. So there is a very huge shortage of kerosene for these applications for cooking and lighting. When I came back from America in 1981, I came to Fulton Taluka. There was no electricity. It was very bad couple of years. So I used to study in the hurricane lantern. So as an engineer, I started thinking, how can we improve upon this? What has not been done? So we started working on the lantern development, and we developed this Nuri lantern, which is an extremely efficient device. It is very lightweight. It produces light equivalent to a 100-watt light bulb, which is and it gives the light equivalent to, you must have seen the Petromax lamps, and it gives the same light output as a Petromax lamp, but it uses almost 50% less kerosene. At the same time, it runs on multi-fuel, which is kerosene, diesel, or ethanol. Slight modification, you can run it on ethanol. And it also doubles up at cooking and lighting. You can cook a little bit. And for areas in like Ladakh, etc., it provides both heat and light. And it's very low cost, around 500 rupees. Now, when we start doing this, we realize that the stumbling block, you see, we did a lot of very basic heat transfer, mass transfer, engineering, etc. And we developed a very good device which we are very proud. I am selling a lot of these devices for Europe and America. This is meant for India, and India, people are not using it as much as Europe and America as a lantern for their camping. We developed this device, and I found that the major problem was this mantle. This mantle was developed by Welschbach in 1860, in a German scientist, and nothing has changed since that time. The mantle efficacy in the lighting process, it is called efficacy instead of efficiency. It produces around 2 to 3 lumens of light per watt. Comparison is light bulb of 100 watt has an efficacy of 10 to 15 lumens per watt, and the compact fluorescent lamp, which you see all the time, has a efficacy of around 50 to 70 lumens per watt. Because 100 years of R&D has gone in electric lighting, so tremendous improvement has taken place. I am telling that we don't need to bring it from 2 to 3 lumens per watt to 50 to 70 lumens per watt. We need to just improve it by 4 to 5 times. Why? When I look at the power plant to light efficiency, it's PPL, then we find that the liquid fuel lighting can be superior to electric lighting. How? Because the PPL of the compact fluorescent lamp is around 12 to 14 lumens per watt, because you lose 70% of energy in the heat, you have a transmission and distribution losses, and ultimately what you get is only 20 units. And this is a remarkable thing. People, anytime when I started working on this, anytime I talked about the liquid fuel lighting, they told me, oh, you're taking us to stone ages. But when we did this, then they realized that this is a remarkable thing, because I'm using the same liquid, same fuel for providing energy to produce electricity, and then coming and burning it in my extremely efficient lamp. That efficiency does not matter. What we need is, through nanotechnology, through new materials which are coming up, I can improve the efficacy from 2 to 3 lumens to almost around by 4 to 5 times, and I'll match the electric lighting. And look at the wonderful thing that will happen. I'll have a decentralized lighting source I can take to any place, I can switch it off, and I'll have a whole scenario from the country's point of view, an extremely efficient decentralized system. Not only that, I can run this on alcohol, which I don't need to import. I can produce my own alcohol, and we have developed lanterns which run on 80% ethanol and 20% water and produce the same light efficacy. So this is a remarkable, why I'm giving you a sense that for rural applications, extremely sophisticated science and technology is required, much more than what is required sometimes in the other areas, and what the new tools we are getting. I could not have thought about this around 10 years back, because the new materials which are coming now through nanotechnology were not available. And this is what the power of the new materials, new science, and for students like you, who should, rather than wasting your life in management, should stick to technology. Liquid fuel lighting will continue. So this is the present thermal lens mantles, which are 1880s vintages. The nanotechnology can help in developing new. In fact, I would like to now talk with Dr. Mishra, and we would like to talk with the material scientists here, and we would like to work on this. That can we work on the mantles? I already have initiated a project with the Indian Institute of Science in the Material Science Department, because they seem to have a tremendous amount of money through nanotechnology initiative, and they feel very excited about it. Let's see what we can do. The interesting part is that this mantle, the flame which heats this mantle is around 2000 degrees Celsius, and it gives light output as if it is coming from 3600 degrees Celsius black body. We still do not understand how the system works, because the thorium oxide is the main thing which is very radioactive, cerium oxide acts like a dopant, and how these systems combine to produce what type of band gaps which gives out this light, which is a wonderful light at around 3600 degrees Celsius. And I am very much sure with this new materials which are coming now, that we should be able to run this mantle glow at around 1000 to 1500 degrees centigrade, which makes it possible for me to have a biogas or some other flames which are at lower temperature. Then we also require the development for sturdier mantles. These are very fragile mantles. They are made of the silk cloth, and if you shake it a little bit, they break. And I'm sure that the carbon-carbon composites which are coming up, the ceramic cloth based, a lot of new materials which are coming, because we want a very lightweight. The flame should just simply heat it up. It's a surface phenomena, because the photons are produced from the surface, so the thermal mass has to be less, etc., etc. And ultimately what we require is to copy the bioluminescence of firefly. How many of you have seen firefly? At what temperature is it working? Is it working at 3000 degrees Celsius? It is one of the most efficient lighting system, and we still are working, the people who are working in the lighting technology, they are still working in trying to understand how the bioluminescence of the firefly works. We still do not know the exact pathway. There are a lot of things which we know, but the exact pathway we do not know. And I am sure that ultimately that will be the most fantastic decentralized system, where I convert the solar energy into what is called food, and that food, which is chemical energy, into bioluminescence. And that will be the most decentralized and efficient system of producing light. So I hope I have been able to give you a flair of how high technology is required in rural areas, and all of you should work on that. The fact remains that with grid electricity still a distant dream for major portion of rural areas, efficient liquid fuel lighting needs to be encouraged. The government has given up. We require almost 150,000 crores to put the electricity in all the villages of this country. And I don't think the government has money, so we have opened up through the Electricity Act. We are asking the private players to come. Private players are coming, but they would like to take only Bombay, Pune, Nasik. They wouldn't like to come to Fulton or other places, because it is not there where the money is. And so what we require is really a technology and a new techniques and new way of thinking in providing light to rural areas. Now, we cannot only look at the liquid fuel lighting. We have to look at the distributed lighting, the electricity, because 100 years have gone in developing the R&D for this electricity. So in the electricity, we pioneered, as was said, that we started this whole program of Taluka based system, which was based upon 10 to 20 megawatt. We are so ahead of time because the Electricity Act had not been modified. So the power plants came around 40 of them, but they failed because you had to give the electricity to the state electricity boards, and they were in very bad shape. Now with this new Electricity Act, I am sure that this will go on a very large scale, and this will take place. So we are talking about every taluka running on its own agriculture residues, and enough agriculture residues are available to produce 10 to 20 megawatt of power to run all its electrical demands. But there is a tremendous amount of research required in 10 to 500 kilowatt range. I am showing you a small steam engine. This is a 6 kilowatt steam engine, complete. You just put in, right now it is running on methanol. You put in methanol, and here is the flue gases, and this is all the steam turbine, the combustor, and the electric part. In fact, the size is exactly the same as a 5 horsepower engine. Look at the amount of miniaturization that is taking place because of technology. And this is what we should be looking. We always had this idea, the steam systems are huge systems because it's very inefficient. But because of the new materials, because of space age technologies, we can miniaturize the size and we can produce extremely efficient systems. So we require R&D in gasifiers, steam engines, Stirling engines, biomass gas turbines which are now working on directly from the gas into the turbines. And the most important thing is this low cost PV. How many of you have read about the, you know a lot of you, what is the photovoltaic systems? There are now systems available in which one photon produces 3 electrons. This is a remarkable increase in the efficiency, breakthrough in materials, where Einstein got his Nobel Prize for a photoelectric effect, in which he showed that one photon will produce 1 electron. But now we have materials and the whole way in which they are arranged that one photon can produce 3 electrons. And this changes the efficiencies from 17 to 18% to almost 50-55%. And this is the amount of research that is taking place all over the world, especially in the United States and Europe. And ultimately, I feel that the nuclear power can be utilized for micro-utilities. In fact, Bhabha was the first person who talked about taluka-based nuclear power plants. And we have enough now data available through the space program, where nuclear power has been used for many, many years, that we should think in terms of nuclear for micro-utilities. The whole range of process, still, we have to talk about what happens when the spent fuel, what are the issues, and then we have to talk about. But very exciting things are happening in the micro scale power units. And this is what I was talking to you before, thermoelectric elements for cook stove. You see, no matter how poor you are going to cook. And most of them cook through these extremely inefficient cook stoves. Now, almost 80-85% of the energy goes simply as a flue gases. Very wasted. If you can put a small thermoelectric elements, and these elements have just happened in the last 4 or 5 years, quantum jump have taken place because of the nanotechnology, because of new materials, and their efficiencies have improved drastically. So with the result that if I can put these thermoelectric elements, and these are not very cheap right now, but what I am giving you a flare is that this is the technology for rural development, that if we can put these thermoelectric elements in cook stoves, we can produce 40 to 50 watt of power. A small amount of power comes back in terms of small fans. I improve the efficiency of the stove. At the same time, a small part of this power can go in lighting the LEDs, light emitting diodes. Light emitting diodes are the biggest cornerstone of rural lighting now, which is being propagated. I don't agree with that completely because of the fact that we still have issues of efficiency, the amount of light output, but the rapid increase in the technology that is taking place is allowing it to become more and more efficient and more white light producing systems. And the same thing is happening in 10 to 30 micro engines. And these micro engines are working on the new materials in the nanotechnology, thermionic systems, where they are producing 10 to 30 watt of power running on ethanol. The work that is being done in 10 to 30 watt, these micro engines are at Berkeley and at MIT. And I had an occasion to see one at MIT. They wouldn't tell me anything. They just showed me the system. And the beauty of this system is that this is a very small system. And you can put it with a LED lamp, and you don't require any batteries because the energy is stored in the liquid fuel itself. So the tremendous exciting possibilities that exist. Focus is rural lighting and cooking. And ultimately, I see a great future for the human-powered small PMDC systems, which is like the Gandhiji's charkha. So instead of producing cotton, it will produce electricity. And these systems already exist. You must have seen the free play radios and the torches that you can see that. And the sophistication that has gone in making these magnets, the systems, is really remarkable. And the same thing can be done. And just you push it for a couple of minutes, you can have a half an hour light. You push it for half an hour, you can have 2 to 3 hours of light. Now, ethanol is an excise subject. It's a very controlled excise subject. You cannot distill ethanol, you cannot use it till you have excise permission. I went to the planning commission, I talked to people, they said, well, this is fine, you have been talking a lot about this ethanol business, but do you have the technology? So we said, we'll develop a technology. So we developed this technology, which is a very interesting technology, and the idea came from the fact that in large number of rural areas, we distill illicit liquor, daru. 50%, they have very simple stores running on biomass. What comes out is around 50% alcohol water mixture. They drink, the men folk drink, they beat up their wives. The wives have to go for 5 kilometers to pick up the fuel wood for cooking. So we thought, can we develop a system by which we'll solve both the problems? So we'll kill 2 birds with 1 stone. And this was the technology. Because alcohol stoves are available all over the world for a very long time. They are used for camping, but they are mostly for 95% alcohol, 90% alcohol. Alcohol is an extremely inflammable fluid. I do not know how many of you have used. It's extremely inflammable. The flash point is very low and is a very, very dangerous fuel. 50% alcohol water, which is daru, is a very safe mixture. So we developed a stove, and this technology was not available. It's a little sophisticated stove with a control valve and all sorts of things. It's a stove which is just like a gas stove. You can have a simmer, you can have high, and it burns beautifully. And we have done a large number of testing of all the women who are in the farm, and they cook, and they say it is just like the gas stove because it has no sound, no smell, and it's an extremely simple way to use it. What is the problem? The problem is excise. So now we are pushing through the planning commission, through the agriculture, and let's hope what happens. Let's see what happens. People are now becoming aware of this. It has been shown to a lot of supposedly important people, including the agriculture minister, including so many people, and this is something which is an ongoing process. We are trying to develop lanterns also running on this, and the advantage is that 50% water ethanol mixture can be easily distilled. It requires much less energy as compared to the anhydrous or the 95% alcohol. You can have a 1 flash and you get around 50%. This is a remarkable, very simple system, and yet you can use it for your own purposes. So ethanol is excellent fuel for cooking and easy to distill, and excise law needs to be modified for use. And R&D is required in biodiesel and pyrolysis oil. There is a very large program of the Government of India working on biodiesel. Now biodiesel, have you worked on biodiesel, some of you? Biodiesel is very difficult to run on, to work in cooking stove because it produces a lot of gumming. It produces a lot of carbon. We have now few stoves which we have tried now working on biodiesel, but it's still a very difficult process. Alcohol is very easy to distill, and you can produce from anything. And we are very proud to tell you that we pioneered the development of ethanol from sweet sorghum. Sweet sorghum or gourd jawar, or it's a sweet jawar, was introduced in India through our institute. And now there are, we worked for 20 years in total darkness. Nobody was interested in alcohol from sweet sorghum, and then suddenly Government of India decided that 5% of alcohol will be used in the cars, and everybody wants to have different sources. So we have now 21 different universities and organizations working on sweet sorghum. We are now getting a national center for sweet sorghum in our institute because of our work, and all this is a part of this whole very major program. So what I am trying to tell you is that science and technology, and very sophisticated science and technology for rural applications to improve the quality of life can be done. The last part is the biogas reactor. A lot of you people have worked in biogas reactors. Now biogas reactors are something which is nothing new. They have been there for last almost hundreds of years, but it's an extremely sophisticated biochemical engineering, and we use it in a very simplified biogas reactor, so the efficiency is very low. We need a very sophisticated chemical engineering process, precise temperature control to improve the efficiency. More than the efficiency of the biogas reactor is the storage of biogas. Today there are a large number of farmers who use biogas for cooking, but they have their own biogas reactor, they have their own cows, they produce the biogas and they use it there itself. We still do not have a mechanism to transport it. The new materials which are coming for hydrogen storage, hydrates porous carbon, again through new materials and nanotechnology, there are materials available now which can store biogas at medium pressures, and if you line up cylinders with such materials, you can have a remarkable technology in which you can store the biogas and give it just like an LPG cylinder. And this will be a wonderful thing for producing for the rural areas. So a scenario of a small utility in rural areas which processes waste into biogas and supplies in small gas cylinders lined with storage materials is, I think, a reality and will take place with new materials. So in cooking and lighting, energy industry is not that it is something that is very we are doing it for the sake of charity. It makes a lot of economic sense because it's almost 30 to 40,000 crores industry in producing alcohol, in producing biodiesel, and the whole range of things that will happen in rural areas in terms of new devices, in terms of growing of biomass, in terms of processing it. It's a huge industry. It will bring in tremendous wealth to the countryside. And I feel that the best way to increase rural wealth is the creation of energy industry in these areas, and supply of liquid fuel and electricity from biomass is the best way to do it. The wealth of the country comes from its land, and this is the best way to produce it. And ultimately, this is a very serious issue because the people who have the money are the people who have the cars, and also the vice versa. And if they start forcing the agriculture to produce fuel for them, then the issue of the food can come. And so we need to have a food versus fuel debate in which we should produce the energy and the food from the same crop and from the same piece of land. And this is where our work on the sweet sorghum becomes very useful, because sweet sorghum is a plant which produces food, fuel and fertilizer from the same piece of land. And this, I think, will happen in more and more plants, and already there are technologies which are coming in which agricultural residues can be broken up for producing ethanol, and that is what I think will happen, so that you can produce food also, and all the agricultural residues will go in producing ethanol. And we, because of our work, we suggested to the Planning Commission setting up a national technology or mission on cooking and lighting. Nothing happened, but I hope that somehow or the other these things will continue. They have this mechanism of coming back, and someday it will happen. Now the last thing is the water, because we are talking about agriculture, and if unless we have water, enough water, the agriculture will not progress. We have a very large amount of rainfall, and our water usage is only 16% of the rainfall. The problem is that the rainfall does not come at a place where we want it. At the same time, it does not come at the whole year. It comes in a very short time. So the issue of the water storage becomes very important, especially in rural areas, because irrigation and water becomes very important. We need to change policy issues for private water utilities, and I feel that the Electricity Act showed us the way. In fact, we are now framing through some ourselves and through some other NGOs a law, an act which is called as the Water Utilities Act. Just like the Electricity Act, Water Utilities Act, where we will store the rainwater and utilize it for the irrigation for other purposes in rural area in the same type of format as the Electricity Act. It will be owned by the villagers and the joint stock company, and it will be given for the water at a certain pricing. But this is an issue which is very emotional, because it is always owned by the government, and I do not know whether the government will allow it or not. But there is already a movement which is now going towards that. At taluka and village level, strategy of combined power and water utilities, when we started working on the taluka and other levels, we found that when you produce power, you produce a huge amount of thermal energy, and that can go in purifying the water. So you have a combined cycle which makes the whole power plant extremely efficient. At the same time, you produce both water and power. In the old times, anytime you had a power plant, they used to say, oh no, you should go for air conditioning. But air conditioning is not the answer. The answer is water and power, the two most important things that are required in rural areas. And as I said, the high technology is needed for water purification. You know, there is a huge amount of work that has gone in the last 40, 50 years, 60 years, large number of desalination plants all over the world, but the efficiency is still very low. Tremendous amount of R&D is required to improve the efficiency, to make the plants smaller, and to overall create a better environment for them. And that is where I think the people like you can help. And the tremendous process improvements needed in water distillation technologies, that was my PhD, and I can tell you that even after 20 years, 25 years, there are a lot of issues which have not been resolved. And ultimately there is a need to educate people regarding usage of pure drinking water. And now I come to my last slide. So I showed to you what is nation building. I showed to you that there is a possibility of utilizing your extremely sophisticated science and technology for nation building through devices, rather than you're going into management do that. And in doing that, you will gain a lot of personal satisfaction. Happiness is a state of mind. You start feeling happy when you become internally secure. What is internal security? Do you have an answer for that? When you start thinking, just sit down, just contemplate. When you think very deeply about who you are, where you are going, what you want, that itself is a process of self-realization and understanding yourself. When you do that, you will get a sense of calmness. A lot of things, lot of issues that were troubling your mind can be resolved. Deep thought of Sanyam. Sanyam is a word which came from Patanjali Yoga. Sanyam is a combination of contemplation, reflection and samadhi. And Patanjali says that when you put these three things together on any issues, you get this tremendous powers. We are not talking about powers, we are talking about our own power. How to become personally happy. When you do that, then it really creates internal security. And internal security helps you becoming less greedy. When you become internally secure, you don't want to show off very much. And when you don't want to show off very much, it has a tremendous implication that you start realizing that a lot of things that you are running after, they become very insignificant. In fact, in the morning I was having discussion with some of the PhD students, and they were giving me numbers on how much they would like to make, how much money they would like to make. I asked them, what will you use that money for? And some of them did not have any answer on what they will use that money for. Just sit down and think about how you can have a very decent lifestyle with some amount of money. Just make like we talked about the energy scenario, the energy log. You have the log for the money. What do you want to do in life? What do you want to use that money for? And then you will come that you can do very good, lot of things. You can have a decent lifestyle with much less money. So this whole process of running after these goals and issues, which are really not the issues, because you have not thought very deeply, and that is what gives you happiness when you start thinking about that. In fact, when you create a very internal calmness and a powerful mind, the most important thing is that it becomes very sensitive to the surroundings. When it becomes very sensitive to the surroundings, that is exactly when you start changing the surroundings. And that is exactly what I was talking about, environmental happiness. When you change the environment to make it better, because you can be like a stone or a cabbage who does not know what the surroundings are. But you as a human being, when you start feeling that the surroundings are not good, I have to stay in the surrounding, I have to make it better. When you do that, that is nation building, because you start changing the surrounding. And that is what we are talking about, how to do that through your technology and through the processes. This internal security also helps us becoming less greedy for materials and resources, and this is the genesis of spirituality. And I believe that the maximum of simple living and high thinking is the answer to that. And I'll tell you a very interesting thing, that today the US uses 350 gigajoules. I think all of you know what gigajoules are. Per person per year. Average Indian uses 10 gigajoules per person per year. And I can assure you that we can have a very decent lifestyle in 40 to 50 gigajoules per person per year. Yet we are not looking at this 40 to 50 gigajoules, we are all the time looking at 350 gigajoules. We want to become like China. Have you been to China? China is now even bigger and sometimes even more remarkable in inverted commas than America. And this is what we want to do. This is a totally unattainable goal with our resources. If we want this goal, we will require 4 earths to have this goal. We don't have the resources. Theoretically, it is not possible. This is attainable goal. And this is I can tell you from my example, because I have done this calculation for myself. And this is the amount of energy that was used in Europe in early 1960s. and early 70s. And I don't think the European quality of life in those times was very bad. And if you have that, I think this is something which we can all strive for. And we are talking about all 110 million people of our country. And this can come when we ourselves become less greedy for the resources, for the things. If you wear one shirt and one pant at a time, what is the need to have 500 shirts or 400 pants? I'm not saying that all of you have all that. There's so many issues that you can think of. You can simplify your life. And I can tell you that when you simplify your life, you find it that it is very, very, it gives you a lot of satisfaction because you don't have to worry about a lot of things. And to my mind, this together with your technology, because I feel that technology, spirituality, they are all part of the same thing, the two sides of the same coin, and you can do both the things and make this country as a great country. And with the reduction of greed, the environment can be made better, and a happy individual can then give back to society both knowledge and resources, and this is the essence of nation building. Thank you very much. I have kept all the URLs, and this lecture is also on my site. I didn't want to tell you before, so now you can read this lecture in full in the site. I'll give you a simple story. You know, there was a very famous saint called Ramakrishna Paramahansa. I'm sure that you are all aware of that. So one of his disciples came and said, "Sir, after 20 years of tapasya, I have mastered the art of walking on the water." He said, "Idiot, I give 1 paisa to the boatman and I do the same thing." What a waste of time. The technology allows us to take care of our mundane things. When technology allows us to take care of all these things, we can spend our effort and our mind on higher things, and that is spirituality. And without, think of your example, supposing I have to spend all my time thinking about from where my food will come, what will happen to my clothing, how will I survive the winter or the summer, how can I spend my time in thinking about higher things? When my basic needs are taken care of, then I can think of higher things. For example, in Fulton, my stomach is small, my basic things are taken care of, I can think about these things. If I had to worry all the time that where my next promotion will come or etc., probably I would not have been able to think about it. Yeah.
You keep talking about high technology, right? I think I've got one observation. Is it high technology or it's an appropriate and relevant technology? That makes no sense.
All technologies are appropriate technologies. Technology which supplies the end product is an appropriate technology. Whether it's a nuclear technology or a space technology.
One element of affordability.
Yes. Technology first, all the process of development takes place in the manner that you first develop technology, then the affordability comes because of the processes and other things. When Shockley produced the first transistor, the cost was $500. And today you don't even count that cost. It's a process, it's an evolutionary process. What is required is a thought process that we had up till now, a very strange process that for rural areas we should have only tinkering. To make them a better can for going to the latrine. Make a slightly better latrine. I think that all those things have to go. The same aspirations that you and I have, they have. How do we provide that aspiration with the less resources that they have? This requires a tremendous new technology. Nobody in America is working on these decentralized electric or the lighting sources. They don't require it. Their grid is fantastic. We need to do that. Yeah. Yeah, because most of these flue gases that come out of the engine is around 250 to 300 degrees centigrade. You can boil the water, you can desalinate the water. You have to put that attachment to that. Yeah. Yeah, we sold half a ton of jaggery in the market from sweet sorghum. and we have sold around 5 tons of syrup from sweet sorghum for the last so many years. Because of the fact that there is a huge amount of machinery which has gone in the sugarcane. Sweet sorghum has a different pith and a different structure, and it requires different things. It's just a matter of time when But more than the jaggery or the sugar, they are more interested in the alcohol because that gives much more money. We are being pestered by. In fact, we don't have a single gram of seed. Not only in India but abroad, we have supplied huge amount of seed to Sudan, to Zimbabwe, to Italy, other places. Yeah.
In the back, let's take.
Yeah. How the rural people can be employed? You see, when you create these energy systems, when, for example, just a 20 megawatt power station, then all the agricultural residues will be brought by the farmers. Today the farmers are burning these agricultural residues in their field because it is a disposable problem. They want to have the field for the next crop, and there is no use for their agricultural residues, so they just light it. It's utter waste. When I start giving them money, they will immediately bring it to the factory. So that is one. Secondly, in the whole scenario of the sugarcane system, each farmer which produces sugarcane is also a member of the sugar factory. So we are proposing that the joint stock companies, each of these farmers will also be the members of that energy producing unit. So this is how the thing. And then after the electricity is produced, then a whole horde of industries come in. If I have been living in that rural area for generations, why would I like to come to Bombay? I would like to stay there if I can get enough money and other things. Yeah.
I think sweet sorghum is Syria.
Yes.
One of your statements you made, it also works like that.
Yes. In the manner that the bagasse can be either go to the fertilizer or as a fodder. Right now there are a lot of people who are using it as fodder.
Okay.
So that is a need. There's a need for all of you to continuously keep on feeding this through the technology into the decision making.
Friends, we have had a very inspiring lecture, and we are running a little late. So if you have any further questions, you can certainly ask Dr. Rajvanshi during the tea time. On behalf of the IIT and the colloquium committee, it is my pleasant duty to thank him for the very inspiring lecture that he has given, combining both technology and spirituality. I will request our former Dean Planning, Professor Tarun Kant, to hand over a memento on behalf of IIT to Dr. Rajvanshi.